Right, well that's one problem system out the door. Discovery Sport that came into us for some changes with the amplifier and the speakers. You should have seen that in the last video. This is another problem car. It's Mark's RS6. It's got an absolutely massive system in it. Not one that we fitted. It was fitted quite some time ago. I'll show you around it. And he rang me up the other day and he's like, the subs popped or something's happened. The mids have stopped working as well. So it's one of those voyages of discovery on equipment that I haven't used before, honestly, and I didn't install. So let's have a look at it now. First of all, cool old car, MTM tuned RS6, and proper dog wagon, as you can see, with some dog hairs in the back. Absolute monster of a W6, that must be a 13 looking at it, or a 12. Small looking box, we'll have to see how big that actually is. Underneath here, this is where the party really starts. So, proper amps. The Voce range. We've got an Uno in the middle and then two Quattros. Underneath the floor is a DSP. And I've already got this unplugged just because I was seeing if unplugging the sub cleared the fault on the Uno, which it didn't. I've already unscrewed all these as well, so I can push them back and show you that these are running Audison's DA digital inputs. So out of the box, these would have had normal analog RCA inputs. So a Quattro would have obviously had 4 RCA terminals and the Uno probably just 2 RCA terminals. You could then swap those out. They've got little thumb screws on here. You can take that module out and swap it with these digital inputs. And then instead of running 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 RCA cables, you then just run these data cables to it. The processor is then clever enough to send the right signals to the right amps, and yeah, happy days. It's a digital signal all the way through to the amp. The problem is that when you want to swap things around, no one else uses these data terminals. You also can't buy the analog cards anymore. I don't think you could ever buy them, but no one's got them. These are quite old amps now, and they're probably about to refresh the Voce range in the next year or two, I would have thought. So yeah, using any other DSP with it is an issue, although I think I've come up with a workaround, which we'll find out if it works by the end of this video. So yeah, first thing's going to be take everything out. This board lifts up. In fact, I can just about show you that. That pivots up. It's bloody heavy. Oh God, the weight on that. And then there's the DSP sitting underneath. That's the Zen module, which was just sitting in there, not particularly well installed. Bit of foam on top of the battery, probably to stop rattles. There must have been something else there at some point which has been disconnected, and I haven't found out where the fuse distribution blocks are yet. So let me just lift this down. Oh, proper heavy. Yeah, anyway, fun one. The mids don't work. Let me just show you in the car. It hasn't got any rear speakers playing. So the customer wants to introduce some rear speakers. In the fronts, it would have had a mid in the door and a tweeter on the dash, but this has got some pillars built. Not the best aiming on the pillar when you sit inside the car. They're very straight across. And it almost looks like the tweeter's kind of pointing in towards the windscreen a bit more. So I don't know, we'll speak to the customer, see if he wants us to do anything with those. But the biggest issue is the mid-range has stopped working as well, which is an issue because the tweeter still works, which is probably on one of the channels on the Quattro, but the mids have stopped on the other channel. So quite why that is, I'm not sure. In the door, I think there's a Voce 6-inch, but I haven't taken those apart yet. He said he had to replace those recently because they corroded. So we might take those out and put some water guard behind them so to stop the new ones corroding again in the future. But yeah, another fun job, and I'll update you as we go. So JLW6 12-inch, now it's out the car, a bit dusty, we'll give it a clean up. A little bit dusty on the inner cone as well, just from where it's been in an unfinished MDF box, which we'll see in a minute. Still need to run a test on this with a different amp I've got and see if the actual sub's blown. Just show you, grab the torch. Show you inside the box. So yeah, bigger than it looks from the face of it. It's quite a decent size enclosure. I'm not too sure if it's going to be 28 litres, which is what the sub asks for. The actual fixing bolt not really wound in properly, and this is a bit odd, so I don't know how well it's sealed, because if I just put the torch there, it's got this foam sealing tape around, and then it's almost like the fascia. There's then foam sealing tape in between these two layers of MDF, so slightly odd construction. Wonder how well that was actually sealing, but unfortunately I didn't get a chance to hear it because it was already faulty when it came in. So yeah, just a little bit of investigation. I think I've worked out why the mids aren't running, because they run daisy chained from one amp to the other, and I think the mids are running off this end Voce. There was actually 2 channels that aren't used on this, so that's good, because we can potentially then use that amp to also run the rear channels, which the customer wants to get running. But that's because the Audison processor that's underneath here that I showed you, that's only an 8 channel. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then this would be running channel 7, so you'd only have 1 channel extra. So they couldn't run 2 rears, because that would have meant it needed 9 channels. So that's probably why that channel's missing, or not used, should we say. If it was bridged for the mid bases, I think that would have been a different configuration of wiring. So yeah, hopefully there's a spare channel, which is good, because we can then still use these 2 amps and just replace the Uno mono block to get the sub running again.
Dreaming psychedelic view, country house, no food, neck shimmering in June. Kick it back on the roof. Saw her naked in the lake, now she's coming up to my room. Just bought a new sports car and filled it up with some fumes. Dreaming psychedelic ways, I fall apart every day. I sit outside with a paper, cocaine on my face. I dreaming psychedelic views. Checked in the hotel round about 8. Weary-eyed, I fell asleep at the desk, jewel on my face. Dreaming of my home state, somewhere far from this place. Can't remember the day that I touched down.
Well, all of that was just to test that the sub worked and wasn't damaged. Some more investigation work. Obviously the sub works, that's all good. That was just what we had to do to test that sub until we get a new sub amp in this particular car. Got the front door cards off because the customer said he had to replace the front speakers recently because they're corroded, and they shouldn't have done really, but I can see why. These Bose equipped Audis, they've got this plastic enclosure on the door, and it's actually quite a nice plastic enclosure if it was still sealed, but someone has cut the back of it out to vent the speaker into the door, and it's got no rain guard on it, and you can see in there is water, which shouldn't be in there. So we'll take that enclosure off, apply rain guard to the back of that massive hole to stop water getting in. Again, there was no ferrules on these wires, and I know I keep banging on about ferrules, but when I took the speaker out, these basically just fell out of the speaker terminals. If they'd been with ferrules in, then I think we could get the speaker terminals tighter and there's no way they'd fall out. But also on the amps, a couple of the wires I took out of the amps, and these speakers had just all disintegrated. The wires had just all disintegrated because the terminals are just pressing down on those and breaking all the tiny little wires. Whereas again, if it's in a ferrule, it's just going to crush the metal ferrule nicely and hold it in there. So that's why we do all that. It just makes it a better system for the kind of the long run, and it's not going to have any issues. Now, the other interesting thing, it had this little bit of sound deadening. Sort of just kind of fitted like that, but when I took the door card off, that fell off because this should have a port, because these were ported enclosures, but the port's gone and it just had a bit of sound deadening over there, so we'll make a little plate to screw in there properly to seal the front of it up properly at least. But yeah, it's a shame it's still not a sealed enclosure with the port in it, because they perform not too bad actually.
Straight to these gates, wow. Revolving doors blowing the heat, waking me up right in front of me. Staff at the hotel wanna meet me like I'm one of those celebrities that go on the TV just to see if they start having sex, then suddenly they'll wake up with a personality. Come on. Which one's gonna kill themselves next? Woke up from an iPhone text, then go back to sleep in Egyptian cotton sheets. I feel so blessed. Every day come back to my room, all my clothes have been well pressed. I walk around this paradise on this hilltop so depressed. Went up to the highest floor, run down like an old matador. No breath left in between the boards, clinging on the rock. Came up here to see the sun, may as well I just bought my gun and head straight down to the garage and dreaming psychedelic view, country house, no food, next shimmering in June, kick it back on the roof. Saw her naked in the lake, now she's coming up to my room. Just bought a new sports car and filled it up with some fumes. Dreaming psychedelic ways, I fall apart every day. I sit outside with the plate.
Solo raving, give me that so you live the basics. Cool it with the statements, cool it with the sensitive, but no, I still hear the tone. You must be out of your mind. Blowing me up on my phone line. While you're blowing up my phone line. Blow me and I'm a decline. I'm on decline. And I'm gonna get back on my own time.
Yep, 20 to 9. The song's called Out of Your Mind, or it's got a line about being out of your mind. Peter from PS Sound, he played that yesterday as he was at work till late, so must be a thing that all us audio idiots are always at work till late trying to fix things. This one, it's been a journey. I kind of wanted to show it when it was all done, but I also want to include this just because it's interesting, or it might be hopefully interesting to people about how to problem solve stuff. I've had help from Peter, from PS Sounds, from Ed, from 4, and from Jason from CEN, notably. They've been pretty helpful. Because when I ran it last night, I had both the Voces plugged in, all the speakers running, and it sounded fine. Today when I put the sub back in and the sub amp connected up, up until a certain level it sounded okay, and then as soon as you went over volume 17 on the head unit, the sub amp in the middle, that Audison SR1.500, started clipping, and there was a horrible clipping sound through the sub as well. Tried it with a different input, which is what I'm running off at the moment, so it's just a different optical lead running to this little optical adapter so I can run it off the laptop. Tried it with a different optical lead, that was still happening. Tried a few different things. Ed suggested obviously checking all the power, because it seemed like a power issue that, because when I muted these, the problem went away and you could run the sub amp up as loud as you wanted. So we're checking all the earths, the powers. Jason then suggested switching the RCAs, and that revealed that there was a problem on one of the channels on this amp, not the amp itself, because these are new, we'll get to that in a bit. And that's why these wires here are just hanging all over the place. So when I got the car, obviously this wasn't my installation originally, these wires were poked there. I tested them, had the rear door cards off, tested them, and there was continuity from these through to the rear doors. So I thought, fantastic. The guy before me had prepped it for rear speakers, but hadn't connected them because they weren't connected to the previous Voce amp. I'll just use those. So I plugged those in, and up to a certain level, they work fine. But what these wires prove, because they're running now to the speakers directly, is that there's no issues whatsoever when I'm running through those wires. So there's obviously a break or a crush or some kind of resistance issue on these. It's then feeding back through the RCA into the processor and onto the sub amp somehow. Don't ask me how, I'm not clever enough, especially not when it's 840. But at least I've got to the bottom of the issue. With the new wires direct to the speakers, you can crank it right up and you don't have any clipping or issues at all. Now all I've got to do is work out how to neatly run the new wires through to the doors, because I haven't had this side out because I didn't install it. I don't quite know how the sub box comes out at the moment, because even though I had the sub out, it doesn't want to just pop out very nicely. So I think that might be for tomorrow morning, of trying to work out how to get that out, because I'm going to need to run the wires through there, unless I come this way. Maybe this side will be easier to get out. I'll have a look tomorrow. But somehow I need to get the wires from here under the floor nicely to then go towards the doors. That's fun. I'll briefly just run through what's happened with the amps. These are brand new. They're still Voces, but they are now with the analog inputs, which are needed so that we could run the Helix DSP Pro. I did plug into the previous Audison Bit One and had a little fiddle around with it, but yeah, not my cup of tea. And also I just needed the extra channels to be able to run the rears. So yeah, brand new amps. The old ones are for sale right now as of 8:42. I don't even know what the date is. Friday the 6th of December. So as of Friday the 6th of December, the old digital amps, which didn't have anything wrong with them, it's just I couldn't use them with this DSP. But the old digital amps are for sale on eBay, selling those on behalf of the customer along with the old DSP. So if you want to grab yourself a system for cheaper money, it's, have a look on there. The link will be in the description of this up until the end of the auction. Obviously, if you're watching this years from now, then don't bother, because they've hopefully sold. But there we go. All right, I think I'm going to pack up for the night. So you'll hopefully see this when it's done, when it's tuned. Yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching this bit. Right, let's sum it up. RS6 is all done. It's late on a Saturday night. It's been quite a long day. Fixing the issue that I told you about previously, and then tuning the car as well. Done two different profiles, one for the driver, one for the kind of passenger as well. So it sounds a bit more equal if you've got two people in the front. I'll show you around this car in a minute, but obviously we had the issues last night, and that meant taking quite a lot of the car back apart again so that we could run the wires neatly. Obviously I tested it with them just running across the back seats. You can't give it back to a customer like that, so I couldn't get that side out. Goodness knows where the other bolt for the subwoofer is. Spoke to the person that originally installed it. He said there's two bolts in there. There's only one visible, so I don't know if the other was fillered over or what. So if it comes to taking the sub out in the future, it might be quite interesting. But we went the other side through the side panel and then back under the seats to get to the seats. As soon as we put those wires in, like we found yesterday, then yeah, everything was working fine. We've also made a new amp board because the old one was deteriorating just over time, I guess, being MDF. If it's been lifted up and down, screwed in and out a few times. And with these heavy amps, we wanted to make sure everything was as solid as possible. Plus we needed a little bit more width with the SR amp in the middle, because it's wider when it's that way round than the old Voce was. So we just needed to space the other Voces out a tiny bit. But it sounds really great now. Like I said yesterday, or like I said before, it's a shame we had to switch all the gear out, because the other two Quattros, there was nothing really wrong with them other than the fact they were on the digital network, which is very difficult to work with unless you've got a very specific Audison processor, which is now very old and technology's moved on, so there's better ways of doing things. The Helix processor, that gives us 10 channels overall. We're actually only using 9. We've got 2 for the tweeters, 2 for the mids, 2 for the front woofers, 2 for the back woofers and tweeters, and then 1 for the sub. So we're actually only using 9 channels. There's a spare one if we ever, I mean, we'd need another amplification channel, but if you wanted to run a center speaker, you could use this specific DSP Pro to run a nice 10 speaker system. I'll grab the camera and show you around it in its finished form. So we've got the sub grill off at the moment because the sub grill's seen better days. I'll pop that back on just before I hand it over. But yeah, nice chunky JLW6 12-inch. I think the box is too small, quite a bit too small. There's limited space within that kind of aperture. In trying to get it out, I managed to get this switch panel out, and you can kind of pull the panel forwards a little bit, and they couldn't have actually made the box any bigger, but for that 12-inch sub, it does look quite small. I think it's supposed to be about 28 litres it's asking for on the spec sheet, and that doesn't look anything like 28 from my eye looking in it. I mean, we didn't water test it, so I'm not sure. And it doesn't quite play the lows, certainly not as nice as the 210s in my car, actually. Again, I didn't think, but yeah, I could probably do with a slightly bigger box in reality. The amps, the Quattros, yeah, they sound phenomenal. I can see why people like them, and shame they're a little bit big. It's difficult to use in most applications. Obviously, this car, they do fit underneath the underneath that boot floor. But in a lot of other cars, you'd need to have them on the side on a very visible rack, or build a false floor to kind of give you that kind of 2-3 inch headroom or space to put those in. But they work well in this system. We've now got the Helix DSP Pro, like I said, centre stage. We carpeted the board just so it looked a little bit nicer. And then the SR1.500, yes, it's on paper quite a downgrade from the Voce Uno that was in there, but that's now putting out, that's putting out 800 watts to a 2 ohm sub. Punches like crazy. You couldn't, I mean, I've got it turned down quite a bit compared to what it can run. So yeah, I don't think what the Uno would have sounded like, because I never obviously heard the sub before, because the damp was already blown up. So that's one downside of it, is I didn't really have anything to kind of compete or match against, but I think that's pretty good now. Customer might tell me otherwise, and if so, we can tune it and change it around a little bit. Underneath, if I've got enough hands, we've tied it up a little bit. There was the old DSP there, and then there was nothing there. I think there was an old HD play box, one of Audison's other devices there, but there was just a lot of dud wires going to it. So we've tied all those wires up. That's now visible because obviously we've got rid of the Audison and we've put the DSP up on this level. That's my high-tech stand for standing the amps up, because you can just prop it under here and hold it up nicely. I'll take that out in a minute. But with the cover down, obviously you don't see anything, and then with that cover on the sub, obviously that'll make it nice and usable for the dogs jumping in and out the back and chucking all the kids stuff in there. The doors, nothing really to see now, but the door cards are back on. We've got the Voce coax behind there on our 3D printed adapters, sound deadened. They had a nice amount of sound coming from behind you. It's when they're tuned and they're time aligned, it doesn't sound like the sound's coming from behind you, but when you mute them, you suddenly go, oh, where's the sound gone? It almost then becomes a sound vacuum behind you. So it is good to have rear speakers and to have them equalized and time aligned properly. They do add to the system, add to the overall volume, and just to the kind of, yeah, to the stage. Up front, we didn't do anything up here. Well, we did actually. We put the water guard behind the Voce mid bases in the doors, because that was very wet in there. So they're now not going to get wet anymore. They're not going to corrode again like the last set did. The pillars, I'd still love to rebuild these at some point. They're very off axis, and you can hear it in the sound stage. You've got to kind of do quite a lot of tuning to this side, especially to try and get anything out of it. That side sounds much more prominent, so you've then got to kind of EQ that down a little bit. You can see the new controller up in here. This is something that when it comes back at some point in the future and we've got more time, that needs tidying up a hell of a lot more than that, but that's just Velcroed up there basically, so we can use sub control and change his EQ. That does just disappear up in there, but that's where the old Audison was. That was also just Velcroed up there, to be fair. And I tapped into the old Audison wire to save running a new wire through. But yeah, definitely not happy with that. Ideally, maybe make some mounts so that it's kind of at that angle the whole time, so then you've got it visible, or at least make something that fits in there better, that can all be kind of dressed up nicely. But that wasn't necessarily part of this job spec. It kind of just turned into that when it was apparent that we needed the Helix Pro DSP. Yeah, pillars. Maybe when there's some new speakers out, we'll try something new in the pillar, and that'll give us a good excuse to rebuild those, get those nicely on axis as well. And I think that'll really kind of improve the front end sound stage. But yeah, nice job. What have we learnt? Well, maybe don't take it for granted that if there's speaker wires visible in the back, that they're necessarily going to be perfect condition if we didn't run them ourselves. yeah, could have maybe saved a bit of time if we'd just run those from the start. But the continuity check on those wires seemed to kind of work okay, and there wasn't any extra resistance on them. So it was a weird one. Just when you crank the volume all the way up, it put the amp into protection mode. So they must have been pinched or cut down to the point where maybe there was only a few strands left. Not too sure. Didn't actually find where the crimp was, obviously, because we couldn't get that side out. I'd have liked to, and again, given more time and more budget, we could mess around with that. Yeah, everyone does things differently as well. Obviously, there was things that I found that I've kind of changed slightly, put ferrules on everything just so that those connections are more stable for the longer term. The woodwork in the back was quite impressive. It's nice to see how someone else has fitted everything in on multiple layers, so that was good to see. But all in all, hope this has been interesting. I want to do a video on the Helix DSP software at some point, just showing how versatile it is and why I like to use it, especially compared to the old Audison software. Like I've said many times, the new Audison software is an awful lot better, and you can do a lot more with it. It's just I haven't used it quite as much. I'm not as experienced with it, so maybe I'll do a little video just showing the difference between all the different softwares. Thanks for watching. If you found this interesting, give us a like, a comment, whatever. It always helps with the algorithms. And if you've got an audio inquiry, drop us a email, audio@cambridgeautosound.com. But I'll give you a quick listen of some tracks on this, and we'll see you on the next one.
They know what you're up to. Misbehaving, they know what you're up to. No beginnings, they know what you're up to. To misbehaving, they know what you're up to. If they know what you're up to, misbehaving.